Turning Pro, Tap Your Inner Power and Create Your Life's Work by Steven Pressfield. Picture yourself for a moment. You're in your late 20s, wrestling with an 18-wheeler down a dark, winding mountain road. Rain hammers your windshield. 60,000 pounds of cargo pushes you down a steep grade, and your only job is keeping your foot on the gas to build enough momentum for the climb ahead. It's dangerous, intense, and in a strange way, it feels powerful. It feels real. This was Steven Pressfield's life. By every measure, he was a professional truck driver. He took pride in his work, respected his fellow drivers, and embraced the romance of the highway. But he was living a complete lie. Hidden in the back of his van, buried under mountains of junk, sat an old typewriter. That typewriter represented his true calling, the very thing he was running from every time he turned that ignition key. He wasn't a trucker. He was a writer too terrified to write. Have you ever felt that way, like you're living a life that's almost, but not quite, the one you were meant for? That's the question beating at the heart of the book we're diving into today, Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. This isn't just another self-help book. It's a manifesto. It's a wake-up slap from a mentor who refuses to let you keep sleepwalking through your life. Pressfield, who also wrote the legendary book The War of Art, has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, not because he offers easy answers, but because he gives a name to the enemy living inside all of us. He calls it resistance, and in Turning Pro, he hands us the battle plan to defeat it. For years, Pressfield drifted. He worked in advertising, drove a cab, picked apples as a migrant worker, and lived what looked like an adventure from the outside. But inside, it was pure escape. He was an amateur, and he was miserable. Then one day something shifted. He made a decision. He decided to turn pro. By the end of our time together today, you'll understand the profound difference between living as an amateur and living as a professional. It has nothing to do with money or fame. It's an internal shift, a change in mindset that's available to every single one of us, right now. You'll learn to recognize the shadow careers and addictions you might be using to hide from your true calling. And you'll discover the simple, powerful habits that define a professional. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally, bravely, becoming yourself. So let's begin. Let's start with a fundamental truth about being human. We're often unhappy with our lives. There's this gap between who we are and who we know we could be. When we feel this discomfort, this self-hatred even, society usually offers us two ways to think about it. The first is the therapeutic model. This model tells us we're sick. We have a condition or a disease that needs treatment. We're ill, and our goal is to become well. The second is the moralistic model. This one says we're bad, we've done something wrong, committed some sin, and we need punishment or penance to be made right. But Steven Pressfield offers a third way of looking at our struggles. He says what's really wrong has nothing to do with being sick or being bad. What's wrong is that we're living our lives as amateurs. And the solution? Turn pro. So what does that actually mean? What is this amateur life he's talking about? To understand it, we need to go back to Pressfield's own story. For years, he lived what he calls the amateur life. He describes a winter spent in a halfway house for patients coming out of mental hospitals. He wasn't a patient himself, but he felt completely at home there. The place was saturated with fear, the unspoken terror of people whose lives had fallen apart. He had a job driving trucks, but he felt a deep kinship with the others who were just stuck. One night he had a dream. In the dream, his messy room had tidied itself. His shirts were folded, his boots were shined. When he woke up, a single thought struck him with the force of lightning. I'm ambitious. I have ambition. That simple realization was both a gift and a burden. He felt guilty for it. Who was he to want more, to rise above others? But that spark of ambition was the first step on his long road out. He left the halfway house and moved into a tiny cinder-block cabin with no electricity, no heat, and no running water. It was a step up because it was his first adult act that embraced his own ambition. He believes that ambition is the most sacred part of our being. To feel it and not act on it, he says, is to turn our back on the very reason for our existence. But even then, he was still hiding. That old Smith Corona typewriter was still buried in his van. The fear and shame were still there. He was terrified of sitting down to write and ashamed that he was so afraid. This terror is what leads us into what Pressfield calls shadow careers. A shadow career is something we pursue when we're too scared to embrace our true calling. It looks and feels a lot like the real thing. It has a similar shape, a similar contour. But it carries no real risk. If you fail at a shadow career, it doesn't crush you because it's not what you truly care about. Are you getting a PhD in literature because you're afraid to write the novel inside you? Are you working as a manager for a band because you're secretly afraid to write your own music? Are you, like Pressfield, driving a truck across the country because it feels manly and adventurous, just like you imagine being a writer would feel, but without the terrifying vulnerability of facing a blank page? His trucking career was the perfect shadow career. It was honest work. It took courage, and the road was a metaphor for freedom. But it was all a delusion. The road was taking him nowhere. Every mile he drove was a mile further from who he was meant to become. And this is where we get into the core of the amateur life. It's a life lived in shadows, a life of denial. And when denial isn't enough, it's a life fueled by addiction. When Pressfield talks about addiction, he's not just talking about drugs or alcohol. He's talking about anything we use to numb the pain of not doing our work. This could be an addiction to love, to sex, to drama, to failure, to money, or even to social media. These are all what he calls displacement activities. We're displacing the energy that should be going into our calling and pouring it into a shadow version instead. He tells the story of a friend who's addicted to love. She's brilliant and talented, a piano prodigy, an award-winning photographer, a world-class athlete. But her life is a series of passionate, all-consuming, and ultimately disastrous love affairs. She's built an entire philosophy around pursuing the sublime through love. It's complex, convincing, and utterly heartbreaking because it's just a way for her to run from her real gifts. She knows it, but the habit is too strong. It has become who she is. The addict, like the artist, is dealing with the pain of being human. They both feel a sense of exile, of separation, but they deal with it in opposite ways. The addict, who is the amateur, takes their pain and turns it into a drama. Their life becomes a shadow novel, a shadow movie. It has plot, characters, and action scenes. They become a character, a beautiful loser, fascinating in their self-destruction. But they never actually produce anything. They never do the work. The artist, who is the professional, does something different. They take that same pain, that same raw material of their life, and they step back from it. They get so bored with their own ego, their own petty dramas, that they learn to handle those elements like a technician handles plutonium. They use it for the good of others. Their shadow symphony becomes a real symphony. The drama moves from the outside to the inside. This is critical. Pressfield doesn't condemn addiction. He sees it as a signpost. Our addictions, he says, are our callings in disguise. They're coded messages from our deeper self, trying to get our attention. If you're addicted to drama, maybe you're meant to be a playwright. If you're addicted to sex, maybe you're seeking a deeper union with your own soul. The question to ask of your addiction or your shadow career is, what is my unconscious trying to tell me? The difference between the amateur and the professional comes down to one thing: their habits. The amateur has amateur habits. The professional has professional habits. We can't free ourselves from habits, but we can replace bad ones with good ones. So let's paint a clearer picture of the amateur. What defines them? First and foremost, the amateur is terrified. They're afraid of failure, but they're also afraid of success. They're afraid of looking foolish. But most of all, they fear being excluded from the tribe. They're afraid that if they truly live out their calling, they'll become different, and the tribe, their family, their friends, their community, will cast them out. The amateur is an egotist. Their world revolves around them. They're constantly comparing themselves to others, feeling inflated when they succeed and crushed when they fail. They see themselves as the hero of their own movie and expect everyone else to see it that way too. Because of this weak ego, the amateur lives by the opinions of others. They crave validation. They're imprisoned by what they think they ought to be, how they ought to act. This is what paralyzes them. Their fear of being judged as their true self keeps them from ever becoming it. The amateur is easily distracted. They fear solitude and silence, because in those quiet moments, that inner voice, the one pointing toward their true destiny, might get too loud to ignore. So they fill their lives with noise, social media, gossip, endless tasks. Twitter and Facebook, Pressfield says, are paradise for the amateur. The amateur seeks instant gratification. They want the payoff without the work. They live in the future, dreaming of the day they'll be discovered, or in the past, reminiscing about a golden age that never really existed. The one place they refuse to live is the present, because the present is where the work has to be done. The surest sign of an amateur? They have a million plans, and they all start tomorrow. They give their power away, to gurus, to bosses, to lovers. They wait for permission. They wait to be chosen. They sit on a stool, like an aspiring actress at a soda shop, waiting for someone to walk in and discover them. And underlying all of this is a simple, tragic fact. The amateur is asleep. They're unconscious. They vaguely sense that if they were to truly wake up and see themselves clearly, they'd be forced to act. And that action is the most terrifying thing of all. But here's the secret the amateur doesn't know. The tribe doesn't give a damn. That group of people whose judgment they fear so much, they're all just as caught up in their own lives, their own fears, their own dramas. They don't have time to worry about you. When we realize this, we become free. There is no tribe. Our lives are entirely up to us. This is the landscape of the amateur life. It's a life of running, hiding, and waiting. It's a life of quiet desperation. So how do we escape it? We turn pro. Turning pro is not a gradual process. It's a decision. It's a moment, an epiphany so life-altering you'll remember where you were when it happened, just like you remember where you were on 9/11. It's often a painful, humiliating moment, a moment where you hit bottom. Pressfield shares 3 powerful stories of what this moment looks like. The first is about a friend, an attorney we'll call Emma's ex. She was driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles and pulled off the highway in Bakersfield. The next thing she knew, she woke up in a motel room, fully clothed, with an empty bottle of whiskey beside her. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but this time was different. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and heard her own voice say, "That's enough, darling. This shit has got to stop." That was her moment. The second story comes from singer-songwriter Rosanne Cash. She was already famous and successful, but she felt hollow. She felt like she was playing a part. Then she had a dream. In the dream, she was at a party, sitting next to singer Linda Ronstadt and an old man named Art. Art and Linda were having a deep conversation. When Roseanne tried to join in, the old man looked at her with pure disdain and said, "We don't respect dilettantes." She woke up, shaken to her core. The dream exposed a truth she'd been avoiding. She was a dilettante. She was dabbling. From that moment on, she changed everything. She changed how she wrote songs, how she sang, her entire work ethic. She said she had awakened from the morphine sleep of success into the life of an artist. And then there's Pressfield's own moment. He was in his early 30s, living in a cheap New York apartment, driving a cab and running from his writing. One night, he hit his absolute bottom. He couldn't rationalize his failures for one more second. He dragged out his typewriter and for 2 hours forced himself to sit there, torturing out a few pages of absolute trash that he immediately threw away. That was it. He put the machine away and went to the kitchen, where 10 days' worth of dirty dishes were piled in the sink. He started washing them. And as the warm water ran over his hands, he realized, to his amazement, that he was whistling. A corner had been turned. He hadn't written anything good. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that after years of running, he had finally sat down and done his work. These are epiphanies. But they don't feel glorious. They feel like hell. They strip away our self-delusions. We see ourselves for who we truly are. And it's not a pretty picture. But in that moment of humiliation, we gain two powerful allies, reality and humility. And those, combined with the shame we feel, can forge the one thing we need to change our lives: will. In that moment, we have two choices. We can rebuild our old lies, or we can turn pro. So what happens when you make that choice? What does the professional life actually look like? First, life gets very simple. The drama falls away. When you were an amateur, your days were structured to flee from fear. You filled them with distractions. When you turn pro, your days become structured to confront fear. You get up at a certain time. You go to your workspace. You do the work. It changes what you do and what you don't do. It changes what you eat and who you spend your time with. The professional shows up every day. No excuses. It doesn't matter if they're inspired or not. The professional acts in anticipation of inspiration. They know that when the muse sees them sitting in the chair, ready to work, she will deliver. The professional stays on the job all day. They're committed for the long haul. They understand that this is a lifelong practice, not a short-term project. For the professional, the stakes are high and real. The professional is patient. They know that mastery takes time. They're willing to put in their 10,000 hours. An amateur believes they'll be ready tomorrow. The professional is ready today, even if they don't feel like it. The professional acts in the face of fear. This is perhaps the most important distinction. The professional is just as terrified as the amateur. In fact, they may be more so because they're more aware of the stakes. But the difference is in what they do with that fear. They don't run from it. They acknowledge it, and they get to work anyway. They, as the poet Archilochus wrote, plant their feet and square their shoulders to the enemy. The professional accepts no excuses. They play it as it lays. Is your life a mess? Did your partner just leave you? Are you broke? The professional takes 2 aspirin and keeps on trucking. Athletes play hurt. Warriors fight scared. Professionals do the work, no matter what. The professional doesn't take failure or success personally. The amateur is on a roller coaster of emotion, defined by their last victory or defeat. The professional knows that the journey is long, and there will be ups and downs. They detach their identity from the outcome. Their job is to do the work. The results are out of their hands. Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, says we have a right to our labor but not to the fruits of our labor. The professional understands this in their bones. The work is its own reward. This leads to the idea of a practice. The professional life isn't a career, It's a practice. Like a monk practicing meditation, or a martial artist practicing their forms, the professional engages in a daily dedicated ritual. A practice has a space, and that space is sacred. Whether it's a painter's studio, a writer's desk, or a founder's garage, it's the place where you do your work. When you enter that space, you're there to work. You leave the ego at the door. A practice has a time. When we show up to the same space at the same time, day after day, we build a powerful energy of intention. The universe, or the muse, or whatever you want to call it, recognizes this commitment and responds. And a practice has an intention. The intention isn't to become famous or rich. The intention is to get better, to go deeper, to work closer to the bone, to achieve mastery. The professional comes to this practice as a warrior. They know the real enemy isn't out there in the world. It's inside. It's resistance, self-doubt, and self-sabotage. And they come in humility. They're there to serve the work, not the other way around. The professional is ruthless with themselves when it comes to the quality of the work. Pressfield tells a story about Picasso who, after months of work on a new series of paintings, took a knife and slashed every single one of them to ribbons in front of his horrified gallery owner. Why? Because he knew they fell short of his own standards. But the professional also has compassion for themselves. A great horse trainer doesn't whip a horse into submission. They make the training feel like play. They want the horse to love to run. In the same way, the professional doesn't flog themselves into burnout. They learn their own rhythms. They know when to push and when to rest. They leave themselves wanting more for the next day. And finally, the professional trusts the mystery. They know that when they sit down to do the work, something will be there. There's always something in the box. This trust allows them to work over their head, to write about things they don't know, to create characters who are smarter than they are. They're not pulling from their own limited intellect. They're tapping into a deeper well of instinct, intuition, and imagination. The best work feels like it came through you, not from you. At the end of his journey, Pressfield takes us to a deeper, more spiritual place. He talks about the Maasai tribe in Africa, who will move their entire village 200 yards up a hill simply because their shaman senses that the first spot is unwholesome. To our modern minds, this seems absurd. But Pressfield asks, what if they're right? What if there are invisible forces, both good and evil, that affect our lives? He believes there are. The evil force is resistance, what the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah calls the Yetzer Hara, the inner shadow self whose only goal is to prevent you from becoming who you were meant to be. And the good force is the muse, the soul, the call to grow, that hovers over every blade of grass. Turning pro, then, is more than just a productivity system. It's a spiritual discipline. It's the daily practice of aligning yourself with those higher forces and fighting back against the lower ones. It's the conscious choice to shift your identity from the ego to the self. In the end, this monumental struggle, this sacrifice, this daily battle, who is it for? It's for the audience. It's for us. The hero goes out into the world, suffers, struggles, and learns. And then the hero returns with a gift for the people. That gift is the raw material of their life, refined by their skilled and loving hands into something beautiful, something true, something that helps the rest of us in our own struggles. You are that artist. You are that hero. The world is waiting for your gift. The only question is, are you ready to turn pro? As we close the pages of Turning Pro, what strikes me most is its brutal honesty. There's no sugarcoating here. Steven Pressfield isn't offering a 5-step plan to an easy life. He's handing you a sword and pointing you toward a battle that takes place entirely inside your own head. The central message is one of profound personal responsibility. For the amateur, life is something that happens to them. For the professional, life is something they create, one disciplined day at a time. In a world that constantly tempts us with distraction, instant gratification, and the shallow allure of online validation, this book feels more essential than ever. We're all living in a paradise for the amateur. The call to turn pro is a call to rebellion. It's a rebellion against the culture of shallowness, a rebellion against our own worst instincts, and a rebellion against the voice of fear that whispers, "Not yet. You're not ready. Wait until tomorrow." The most powerful and liberating idea for me is the concept of the shadow career. It gives us a language for that nagging feeling of being off course. It's not that we're lazy or unmotivated. It's that we've cleverly channeled all our energy and ambition into a decoy. Recognizing your shadow career isn't a cause for shame. It's a clue. It's a map that, if you read it correctly, points directly to your true north. So how can we start applying these lessons today, right now? Here are 3 simple actions you can take. First, identify your primary form of resistance. What's your go-to shadow activity? Is it scrolling through social media? Is it starting unnecessary drama? Is it binge-watching another series? Don't judge it. Just name it. Acknowledge it as the shadow version of your real work. That awareness is the first step. Second, define your practice. Make it laughably small. What's the absolute minimum you can commit to? Is it writing 1 sentence a day? Is it spending 5 minutes in your workshop? Is it making 1 sales call? Create a sacred time and a sacred space for it, even if it's just a corner of your room for 10 minutes every morning. The point isn't the output, it's the ritual of showing up. And third, make a decision. Pressfield emphasizes that turning pro isn't a wish, it's a decision. Decide that for today you will be a professional. When fear shows up, and it will, you'll greet it, and then you'll do your work. When the urge for distraction arises, you'll notice it, and then you'll gently return to your work. You don't have to be a pro for the rest of your life. Just be one for the next 24 hours. Ultimately, Turning Pro is a book about self-respect. The amateur life, with all its excuses and dramas, is a life of self-betrayal. The professional life, with its quiet discipline and daily courage, is a life of integrity. It's about honoring that spark of ambition you felt long ago, that secret dream you've been hiding in the back of your van. It's time to stop running. It's time to face the blank page, the empty canvas, the waiting world. It's time to turn pro. That was a deep dive into the core ideas of Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. We've certainly covered the main principles today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of a feast. You can see what's on the table, but you can't taste it. The real power of this book is in the way Pressfield's words hit you, in the personal stories that resonate so deeply they feel like he wrote them just for you. This summary is your invitation to the feast. If anything we've discussed today has sparked something inside you, I urge you to get a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts. It's an experience that can fundamentally change how you approach your days and your dreams. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if this journey through Turning Pro has brought you any value, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep challenging ourselves and growing together.